Okay, this is part 3 of the mini course, How to Use Claude Cowork for Sales. In today's video, we're going to go through exactly how you can use Claude Cowork in order to do prospecting for your sales campaigns. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay. I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years now, selling to some of the largest brands in the world. And right now I'm focused on building AccuSales, which is a go-to-market engineering firm, helping companies and sales teams within companies adopt AI to be able to really generate more pipeline and close more customers. So if you like that kind of content, follow me here on YouTube. All right, let's dive into the 3 workflows we're gonna go through today. I like to break up prospecting into 3 different stages. The first one is territory planning. So if you've been in sales, like your company's probably gonna give you a list of accounts either quarterly or once a year. So it's important to understand which one of those companies you actually wanna spend the bulk of your time in to try to break into because you feel like they are the ideal customer for your product or service. So Claude is really good for territory planning and territory mapping. The second workflow we'll go through is company research and mapping the buying committee. So once you've kind of figured out where to spend your time, if you want to go after, company A, for example, it's really great to use Claude to understand why that company would want to buy your product or service, and then who within that company would actually care to solve for the pains their product or service solves for. So that's a really great use case for Claude as well, which we'll dive into today. And third and finally, we'll dive into, now that you've figured out which companies to spend your time on and who to reach out to within that company, how do we actually build messaging so we break through the noise and get that first discovery meeting with that organization. So we'll dive into all 3 of these workflows in today's video. Okay, so let's start by doing some territory mapping. So I'm in the Claude Cowork UI right now. One of the main things that I want to share is whenever you are using Claude Cowork, I highly recommend that you create your own folder on your computer. So Claude only outputs the files that it creates into that particular folder, so you're not looking throughout your computer on where the heck did Claude put this file. So always create and mount that folder to whatever work you're doing within Claude Cowork. Now, if you're working at a bigger company, there's a very high chance that you already have an ICP criteria. So you can just take whatever file that's stored in, or if it's in a Google Doc, and you can upload it and mount it here or put it in this folder for Claude to use. If you don't, and you're at a startup where the ICP is constantly changing, what I'd recommend doing is maybe taking a list of 50 companies and actually manually tiering them. And then from there, put that into Claude and then have Claude derive that ICP criteria. So this is what I actually did for this video. So I took a list of 108 companies, I manually tiered them and did my research on what would be a tier 1 account versus tier 2 and 3, and what accounts we should disqualify. And Claude derived that these are the 5 data points that I was using to come up with this criteria. And once you have this ICP criteria, what I would recommend doing is rather than just having it as a Claude Cowork chat window, I would recommend saving it as a project. The reason is account tiering and territory mapping is a workflow that most sales reps don't do quite frequently. They might do it once a quarter, or if you get accounts yearly, you might do it once every 6 months. And it's a workflow that's very sequential. So this is a great use case for using projects within the Cowork application. And so here I took the criteria that Claude derived and I put it as the instructions for this project. So I just copy and pasted this. And then from here, what we can do is actually upload a new set of companies for Claude to review and then come up with a criteria, or tier those accounts. So here I'm gonna go add files, and then I'm going to have this file that I created with a bunch of test companies. And I'm going to ask Claude to tier these organizations based on the instructions provided. So I'm going to kick off this workflow, and Claude's going to read the instructions and the project instructions, look at this file, and then start executing this workflow. So I'm going to let it run for a minute, and let's see what Claude outputs. All right, so Claude just finished working and tiered all 8 companies that we shared with it. What I did before this video is I actually manually went through and tiered all these companies using Google, LinkedIn, and Crunchbase. And so let's compare what Claude gave us versus what I did manually. So Claude's tier 1 accounts are on the right. So everything Claude outputted is on the right. So Auth, Zed, and Klein are tier 1, which I also called as tier 1. Tier 2 are FOSA and Truffle Security, which I also have as tier 2. I'm disqualifying ChainGuard and PostHog. And then I am also having Flamingo and Subimage as tier 3. So what this workflow actually did is I took a list of accounts that I manually tiered. I had Claude derive an ICP qualification criteria. We saved that into a project, and then I gave it a list of companies, and it manually derived at 100% accuracy rate the same tiers for the same companies that I did manually. Now, these 8 companies were not part of the initial 108 list. So it's very cool to see that, using Claude, we can automate a ton of territory mapping and account tiering based on a qualification criteria that we share with Claude. All right, so now that we tiered our accounts, let's do the second workflow, which is actually figuring out why this company should buy from us and who within that company should buy from us. So what I've done is I've taken the tiered account list, I put it into our folder that we've been using as our working folder for this course. Now, we use projects for the first workflow because it's a very infrequent workflow. Account tiering is not something that you do on a weekly basis or across different conversations. And so it's really great if you're doing a very sequential workflow to have it in a project. For deep outbound research, this is something that you might do more frequently and you maybe want to be able to do it across different conversations. And so what I like to do for this particular workflow is actually package it into a skill file. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start and actually invoke this skill. We talked about skills in our previous video, but while I have this workflow running, we'll actually kind of unpack what a skill is and then how this skill works in particular. So I'm going to say I want you to run the Outbound-Full. So the / command actually lets Claude use that particular skill to research the tier 1 accounts in the folder attached. So I'm going to kick this off and I'm sure Claude's going to ask me a couple clarifying questions. So let's see what it asks me first. And then from there, let's go into the skill file itself so we can see what Claude is doing under the hood and the instructions that I provided it. Okay, cool. So it did find the tier 1's accounts, which was AuthZ and Klein. And it's going to ask me a couple questions. So let's see what Claude asks. It said, yep, run for both. And then outbound outreach messaging for the economic buyer and champion for each account. How many contacts? Let's do 2 per account. And then let's see, I think Claude should start executing this workflow. Okay, cool. So it's running the skill. So while this is going in the background, let's go and actually look at this skill file. So in order to find skills, we have to go to customize right here. And then here we have our plugins, connectors, and skills. So if we click into skills, we go into Outbound-Full. What this is doing is this is generating an HTML web page that is doing deep research on every single company that goes through this skill workflow. So while our account tiering was really to find very firmographic information to figure out if the account is worth reaching out to, what this skill is doing is a little bit more in depth, where it's actually going through and doing a pre-flight check to figure out if we've reached out to this company in the past, going through finding out the business model, the buyer type, what the paid products are, and then most importantly, if we go down here, is it maps out the, where is this? Okay, buyer readiness, and then it maps out the service. So it actually goes through the company's go-to-market strategy and then maps out what pain points in their go-to-market strategy parts of my service would help solve. So this is a lot more in depth than what we did with our ICP qualification criteria. And so this is a skill that I run quite frequently. And what is it doing? Okay, so Claude is actually asking if we can run 2 agents in parallel to be able to research both companies in parallel. So it's going to multitask as it researches both and builds out this HTML report. So let's let Claude run this for a sec and see what it outputs. Okay, so our Claude agents just finished. It took about 15 minutes for them to go through this workflow. Let's take a look at what they outputted. So here is for AuthZ, section 1, pre-flight checks. It's going through the ICP screen, which we already did in the past. It passed the ICP screen. Gives a brief on the company and what they do. They're selling. They have an OSS to paid model. Here's the funding information, how many employees they have, the pricing tiers, any customers that they might be using, GitHub stars. This is all useful information for me. And then the most important thing is not ICP qualification, but pain to AccuSales service mapping. So being able to map what pains they might be experiencing when it comes to go-to-market based on some of the firmographic information that we have on them, and mapping exactly what AccuSales capability would help them solve that pain. And here's the do nothing if they don't solve this. So some buying readiness, actually reconstructing what their go-to-market motion could look like. So based on this, this is a lot more in depth than what we did in the account tiering exercise, where we were just looking at high-level information to be able to flag yes or no for whether or not to go after this account. And then here it also calls out, key contacts. This is the actual sources on where we found the contacts, or some, quotes from this person. Here's our potential champion target, which would be head of revenue when they join the company. And then here's some initial outbound or outreach messaging for a cold call script, emails. Is there LinkedIn as well? Yeah, LinkedIn as well. And then same for Greg. So this is for Autzed. This is really good. And then if we go to Klein, it's going through, wait, what is this information? Oh, gotcha. Okay, interesting. So it's actually saying here's a verification gate. Looks like there's a lot of people from Klein that went to OpenAI. So double check if the company is operational, even though we did the account tiering exercise. So it has the exact same kind of flow, with section 1 being the disqualification gate, company brief, account classification, ICP qualification. Wherever it says validated, it just means that it's actually has a source that it can cite. And then inferred is just based on all the other information it has and making an educated guess. And then back to pain to AccuSales service mapping. So enterprise demand is 100% inbound and founder improvised. So how can we actually make this more repeatable and not just bottlenecked by a founder? Buying readiness, go-to-market reconstruction, where AccuSales fits in, and then key contacts. Now that we have this high-level account research report built together, what we can do next is actually chain some of this information and actually start creating emails and reaching out to these people. So what I like to do from here is, for example, if I say, can you use Clay? So Clay is a tool that allows you to be able to research companies as well as to find contact information. There's others out there like LeadIQ or Apollo, but I can ask, can you use Clay to find the email address for Saud Rizwan so I can reach out to him? So what we can do now is, now that we've had this Outbound-Full skill run and create this report with a bunch of research, now we can use some of the other tools that we've connected to Claude to actually go and find contact information within these companies. So I don't want to burn through a bunch of credits doing this, so I'm just going to have to pick one. But in theory, what you could do is say, based on these reports, what are all the contacts within Klein and Autzed that we can reach out to? So using the Clay tool, we found Saud Rizwan, and then here is his email. And then from here, it's giving me his LinkedIn, his email, and his name. And then now we can reach out to him. So now in this single chat, what we've been able to do is actually do deep account research on 2 companies that we've already tiered. And then now we've pulled contact information from the key contacts within these organizations that are going to be our economic buyer and our champion targets. So now that we have the people, why they should buy from us, the next step is to actually build a email and outbound sequence, both on email, LinkedIn, and cold calls, so we can actually break through the noise and get that discovery meeting. All right, now for our third and final workflow. Now that we've researched a company, found the people we need to reach out to, let's actually build out messaging on how we're going to reach out to them. So I'm going to use Saud Rizwan, the founder of Klein, and I'm going to give Claude another skill for it to use in order to create messaging based on my brand guidelines and the tone of the outbound messages that I want to create. So I'm going to say I want to reach out to this prospect. Use the Klein HTML report in the folder and his LinkedIn profile to build email and LinkedIn messages for me to land a discovery meeting. For the email messages, create a 4-email sequence using the cold email skill. For LinkedIn, create 3 LinkedIn messages using the LinkedIn prospecting skill. So what we're actually showing in this workflow is we're taking the output from all the workflows that we've done so far, and we're giving Claude access to go look at this guy's LinkedIn profile, as well as use the report that we generated from our previous chat, and then use 2 skills together to create a end-to-end sequence with 4 emails and then 3 LinkedIn messages. So I'm going to kick this off and let's see what Claude generates for us. All right, so Claude just finished writing messaging specifically for Klein. And so if we actually click into what it output, It did some more research compared to what we just did. It's giving us a 4-touch cold email sequence with subject line and what hook, and with the call to action being, can we run a sales audit for Klein? And so it's giving us what day to run these emails, as well as what the email subject and body would be. And then here it's giving us our 3-touch LinkedIn sequence. Now that we have all of this is really great because you can run this for multiple people at the same time. It doesn't have to be specifically for one individual. So for example, if you had a list of 50 people, you might want to just have this tiered to where it's one email sequence per account. But you can slice and dice this however way you want to see fit. If you're going after much bigger organizations, you could say, hey, for this company, all the software engineers, I want to generate a 4 email sequence just for the software engineers, write it out, and then you can just mass blast those emails to all the software engineers that you enrich. But since we're going after the CEO, we can actually build a very highly customized message for that individual person. Now the next step we can actually do is we can use our HubSpot connector to actually create this contact within HubSpot and then move this messaging into HubSpot. So for example, we can say, can you create a contact for Saud Rizwan in HubSpot and create email tasks with the emails and LinkedIn tasks with the LinkedIn messages that you just created. So now what we can do is, now that we've created all of this in Claude, we can actually push this back to our systems, which are going to be HubSpot. So we can actually create this contact in HubSpot and then push all these emails. So it's not just sitting in a doc on your computer somewhere and you have to manually copy and paste it. We can actually have Claude push this into HubSpot. So let's let Claude run through this. Oh, okay, cool. It's working through it now. It's creating a contact object within HubSpot for Klein and the CEO, and then it's also creating 7 tasks associated with this. So let's actually go into HubSpot and see what Claude created. So now within HubSpot, I can go up here and look up Saud's name, and this contact has been created from Claude. And then here we can actually see these are the emails that Claude is using. So it's using the HubSpot connector for Claude, so you can actually see that it's getting pushed from the Claude desktop app, and it's giving us the sequence that it created, and it's giving us due dates, so it's aligned to exactly how we want to structure our cadence. Now you can use this for other outreach tools if you're using something like Outreach or SalesLoft or Lemlist to be able to push these contacts in there and then help it create the sequence itself from the messages. So it's a really great way to have Claude as your home base to be able to execute and move the messaging from Claude into any sequence you might have already created. So yeah, here it's going to go through, here's the actual connection message itself. And then here is the different LinkedIn messages. So here's like email 2, for example. Here's the subject line, and then here's the actual body of the email that you can start leveraging. And then here's one for the first email that we're going to send out. So it's very cool to be able to have Claude connected to all your different sales tools, so you can actually create a contact, write messages for the contact, and then push those messages, and then create a sequence, all from just a single conversation within Claude. Okay, so this concludes video 3 of our mini course on how to use Claude for sales. In this video, we talked about how to use Claude Cowork specifically for prospecting and the 3 different stages of prospecting. We talked about how to use Claude for territory planning, how to use Claude for deep account research and finding the right buying committee within those accounts, and then how to use Claude to write your email and outbound messaging sequences. So in video 3, we dove into prospecting. In the next video, in video 4, we're going to dive into, now that you've done the prospecting and you actually landed that first discovery call, how can we use Claude to be able to prepare for that meeting so you knock it out of the park and maximize all the meetings that get booked on your calendar. So I'll see you guys in video 4 on how to use Claude to maximize your sales meetings.